Hello and welcome back to Wyoming Watch from the Wyoming Tribune-Eagle. I'm Noah Zahn, your state government reporter here. On Monday, the Wyoming Legislature's Joint Judiciary Committee met to discuss a controversial potential legislation concerning book policy. Some have called it a full-out book ban, and some have said it will grant more authority to Wyoming parents. This week, I chatted with library staff from Laramie County and Goshen County, and I heard that they don't really see this issue in their community. And I heard a plea for elected officials to address these issues locally, saying this statewide legislation would be too risky. Now, here's the conversation I had with that panel of 5 library professionals. I'm here at the Laramie County Library with library staff to talk about some of the recent proposed legislation regarding book policy across the state. There's 6 of us in this room right now, and Antonia, I guess we'll start with you if we can do some introductions maybe about how your role is important in this conversation.
Yeah, my name is Antonia Gauna. I'm the executive director of the Laramie County Library System, and I oversee the delivery of library services to Laramie County and oversee the staff members. At this point, we are 90 plus staff members at all of our library locations, and I've brought with me 3 staff members, and I'll let them introduce themselves and their roles within the system.
I'm Beth Cook, the Director of Public Services here at Laramie County Library System, and I think my role, or the importance of my role in this conversation, is that I oversee the public services that we're offering our entire community, and looking to equitably share resources and meet the needs of the community. So overseeing that and making sure that that's happening.
My name is Minda Camphouse, and I'm the Youth and Outreach Services Manager here at Laramie County Library. And I've been with the library for 12 plus years in various positions. And so currently I worked with the youth services staff to develop our collection so that it's balanced and fair for our children and their caregivers.
I'm Darcy Lipp-Acord. I am the Collection Development Manager here at Laramie County Library System. My role is to oversee collection development in a big picture way, both by ensuring that our collection is meeting the information needs of the community, as well as making sure that our selectors and the people who are developing individual collections are applying professional criteria and professional standards to collection development.
I'm Christine Brady. I am looking at this from 2 different perspectives. One, I'm the Wyoming Library Association president, so I'm looking at this as how do these bills impact our libraries in general, both public and school, as well as academic. And then I am also the director of the Goshen County Library. I've been there for 6 years, so I have a unique perspective on how some of these bills impact a really small library system.
Great, thank you. I think first of all, if we want to start with a little bit of background, I guess. I'm not sure who would want to take this, but talking a little bit about, what people in the state see as an issue here and why this current route that the state legislature is pursuing, how it's come to that point. Does that make sense? And is there someone that wants to tackle that?
I think that the current Judiciary Committee members are hearing from people in the state who are concerned about certain kinds of materials being accessible in both school and public libraries. However, feedback from a large portion of Wyomingites would indicate that they are comfortable with parents making those decisions for their own children and their own teens. And so I think that there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I feel like the legislators might be hearing from a relatively small portion of the population, and I feel like we are hearing and we are seeing in the numbers that we see in our buildings and the people who are circulating materials and immense support for libraries. And so I think we've come to a situation where there is a lot of misinformation driving the conversation, and we need to start to try to come to some common understandings.
Sure. I think it's a little difficult to understand what the true driver is, because what we're hearing from our stakeholders and from library users is significantly different than what the legislators are saying that they're hearing from their constituents. So I've pulled some numbers, and in the 2 years that I have been the executive director of Laramie County Libraries, I have received 5 requests for reconsideration. And that is the formal process by which the residents of our county challenge a book in our system and say that it is inappropriate for the collection for one reason or another. Of those 5 challenges, none of them have been because they are sexually explicit. If they are unclear or unsure about anything, how they can challenge those titles and ask us to reconsider them, we want those processes to be very clear and transparent. And so we're going through a public comment period right now on new and clear policies, and those things are being reviewed by our board of directors. And so we find this compromise that is supposed to be kind of local government in action, right? Like the best, like the best world of local government. And we want it to be a collaborative process with our stakeholders. And our stakeholders aren't telling us that they're concerned about this. So when the legislators are telling us that it's a big concern of their constituents, there's a divergence there. We're not hearing that.
And I want to talk more about those new policies in a little bit, but you, Antonia, and Darcy both referenced the feedback that you're hearing from your constituents, and I'm curious, Christine, from your perspective, the statewide perspective, are you hearing something else, or is it?
No, it would be very much like Darcy and Antonia talked about. We are not hearing this kind of uproar over books. We maybe have a few counties that are experiencing a little bit more as far as challenges and reconsideration go. By a few, I mean 2 out of 23. So that statistically doesn't tell me that this is a big problem. I think there was a national data that said that 1% of the population has an issue with books in libraries. 1%. And 2% of the population is working to keep books in libraries. So we're not talking about like this huge 99% of Wyoming thinks these books should leave, or even 75% of Wyoming. We probably are talking about that 1%.
And that 1%, is that statewide or nationally?
That is national.
Nationally. I was going to ask if you thought, this was maybe driven by national issues, because that's something that's become, I don't know what you want to call it, a culture war topic.
I do believe this is a national agenda. The lists are similar when we look at Florida, Texas, Iowa. There's one in South Carolina. One of the books that gets referred to often was addressed in Virginia, which the circuit court actually even, that judge dismissed the case completely. Right. So, but the lists are the same. They're pretty identical, and they consistently have pretty similar things.
Well, the legislation has been borrowed from state to state, and the title lists have been borrowed from state to state. And just because it's a national issue, I think doesn't necessarily mean that it may not be important to our local residents. National issues can be important here locally, but it doesn't mean that it can't be solved locally, right?
Absolutely.
I think that if a national issue were important to Laramie County residents, we should have local conversations about that. We can, the real benefit about living in Wyoming is that we know our neighbors. We know our cardholders. We see them every single day. We live by them. We have a small enough county where we can talk to our people, where we can converse with people at a local level, and we can come to compromises and solutions that meet the needs of our residents without statewide legislation. And that's the
Agreed.
benefit of living in Wyoming.
Agreed.
100%.
Well, and I think to add on to that is that we're very receptive to input from the community. There's a lot of patrons that come in with requests, and we do our best to fill those requests. And so we take their input seriously when somebody does bring a challenge or reconsideration. We do our due diligence. We don't just look at it and say, oh no, I like this book, we're going to keep it. But we really look into it and research it and go through all the needs, so that when we come to a decision, when Antonia comes to a decision, we have resources behind it, and especially things that are materials that are appropriate for each community, because we recognize that each community is different. So having that option and that opportunity for our community to be able to be involved is there. They just have to utilize it.
And you talked about solving those issues on a local level, and right now, or just a week or two ago, you announced that the Laramie County Library System opens public comment for these new policies. I don't remember the exact name of it, but basically reviewing what materials come and go and how those are challenged. Is that accurate? And can you tell me a bit about how you decided on this policy? You talked about the legislature modeling this bill draft off of other states. Have you looked at how other communities have addressed this issue locally, and that's how you've come to this point? And are you hoping this will be sufficient?
Absolutely. So we really did an environmental scan. We looked at policies from across the country, particularly in communities that are similar to ours. We looked at library systems that reflect the community values that we think are upheld here in Laramie County. We did, we looked at policies that are at similar institutions, and we kind of cobbled together a policy that we think is reflective and robust, and really illustrates the processes that we have here in place in Laramie County, and presents not only a community-driven but a transparent reflection of the work that we do here, and created both a collection development policy and a reconsideration policy and process for not only our materials, our library materials, but also a reconsideration for programs, events, library displays. What am I missing?
I actually think you've got that.
I think that's
Yeah.
it. Okay, all right. And it was reviewed by our board of directors. It's now being vetted by county residents through public meetings and through a public comment period. The biggest concern that we've heard so I think to date we've received 4 comments, half of which have been incredibly, 2 of which have been really supportive and just said this is right on target, I support this. The other 2 of which had a couple of concerns, and largely those concerns are based off of a mention of ALA in the policy. And I understand that there's a concern of any sort of affiliation with a national association. So I think that gives us an opportunity to reflect and reevaluate whether or not we want to align our organization with ALA. And really, any sort of alignment with ALA is really a perceived one. We are very independent. We don't have any sort of association with the national organization. It really is a reflection that in the past, our organization has adopted ALA's freedom to read and library Bill of Rights statements. And that's really just a statement that we have adopted those policies. And those policies were adopted in the 30s and the 50s, respectively. So they are really evergreen statements that reflect this nation's First Amendment constitutional rights. So they're not really reflective of, I think, the current contentious climate that is presented when you talk about the American Library Association, which I think, granted, has become a little bit more of a political institution and does reflect some of the differences in political ideology in our country. And so we really do try to write policies that just reflect what's happening here in Laramie County, the work that we do to represent our constituents, and how we can be transparent and clear going forward. So I think we've gotten some great comments. It gives us an opportunity to address them in our documents and to make some adjustments moving forward.
A collection development policy is just a way for a public library and its constituents to, via the elected board, via the representative board, to agree on, here are the parameters for our collection, here are the things that we, the demographics that we serve, here are the criteria by which we place materials on our shelves or collect electronic materials, whatever that is. And a reconsideration policy is a furthering of that conversation, where a patron can say, hey, I'm really concerned about this particular material. Can you look at this in more detail? And we do, as Minda said, we're very conscientious about looking at objective criteria for why that material may have been placed in a certain collection. If we've done our homework, a lot of the times our response is, we've reviewed this, it is appropriate for this age level of collection, it is relevant to this age level of a collection, and it fits these parameters that we've established in our policy. But that doesn't always happen. Like I have been involved in times when we've reviewed a material and said, maybe this should belong in a different collection. But again, if we are collecting materials per our policy and per our professional criteria, that does not happen often. It is still an opportunity for patrons to have a conversation, to engage with us in a locally controlled environment where we can further review materials.
Mm-hmm. And is that, as a professional, making those distinctions, is that different from how the state has been trying to define, everything under 18 versus everything over 18? Is that kind of different, like young adult having different material in there? Is that making sense? Like, are those definitions kind of butting heads?
They could be butting heads a little bit. So librarians, one of the things that we're trained on is being able to look at developmental stages and materials that are developmentally relevant to those stages of child development. And I think that's another piece of misinformation that's been in the conversation. Like Minda's collection, for example, is definitely divided into pre-K to K, and then K to 2. Not divided necessarily, but those are the age groups that she's collecting for: K to 2, grades 3 to 5 or 3 to 6, and then teens. And materials may be placed in those various collections that are relevant to those age groups. But that's not it's very rare that you'll see a 18 and under collection. Mm-hmm. So they may be divided in those kinds of age levels.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to also input really quick that these collections are intended to support families and parents as well.
Right.
To have conversations and to bring topics up. And just, we do accept and know that one topic may not be right for one family and it's right for another family. So it's not just about the kids either. It's about supporting families, supporting parents, and having these well-researched, well-rounded collections to do so.
I thought it was really interesting that during the session, Representative Chestic made a motion to amend the bill to incorporate or to exempt materials that primarily were aimed at age-appropriate sex education materials or materials that addressed age-appropriate puberty topics, and that nobody seconded that. It's difficult to understand that, libraries in their essence are intended to be institutions for public information, and that educational and informational materials weren't supported by those legislative members.
We were kind of talking about it before recording, and in these meetings, some of them have accused potential librarians of looking for loopholes. I think nefarious was one of the words they used. So you're saying that's not happening?
No.
Okay. Just making sure.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, to think that we actually have time to do that is one thing. Because I just don't know a library director, a library staff member that isn't looking to see how they can best serve their community and help the community that they exist in thrive. I think that's what we're passionate about. Trying to figure out how to subvert joint judiciary is not at the top of our priority list. We do want to make sure that we, from my perspective in WLA, that we are standing up for our libraries, that we are protecting our libraries, that we are trying to clear up misinformation, that we're supporting our library staff the best that we can. But that's very different than trying to find a loophole.
And I also think that kind of language is just so sad, because our constituents need libraries. Antonia just talked eloquently about economic disparity. Libraries are doing so many things, and we will always do books because books are our basis, but there are classes and programs. We have our Library to Business initiative. We have early literacy story times, early literacy actual classes to help young parents. And so when we have this kind of image being put out there that librarians are nefarious, and doing terrible things, I think the people who are most susceptible to that are probably people who aren't very familiar with libraries, and that's going to be a barrier to them using libraries. There are so many good things that libraries do for their communities, and I will say that making sure that we have a wide variety of resources for a wide variety of people and representing everybody in our community is one of the best things that we do. But it is not because, I think each of us personally, with our own families or our own siblings and things like that, we might also not choose certain books for certain children. But we respect the right of different people to make those choices. My choice for how I raised my kids shouldn't be the choice of somebody else for how they're raising theirs. For one thing, the world is different. For another thing, my own situation and circumstances and beliefs are different. So our job as a librarian is to make sure that we've done the best we can to represent those needs of everyone in our community. And we are... we had a speaker at an all-staff day the other day who said librarians are a microcosm of the community. They see everything, and we do. We see everybody who comes through our doors, and they are diverse, and they have different disparities in economics and in social advantage and all kinds of things, and we're trying to serve them the best that we can.
Well, and I just want to add that there's been a consistent theme of wanting to protect children. And so when this is thrown out, it makes it sound like librarians and library staff don't want to protect children. And that's so not true. In fact, a lot of us have our own children. We bring our own children to the library. My kids have grown up in the library, and I want to protect them as well. And we look at the community children as our own. And we're not seeking out to be hurtful or harmful. But we want to work with our families to provide the best service for each of them and keep that level of protection for them. And that's why we include them in the reconsideration, because we want to know if you feel that these things are not protecting your children.
And earlier, you were kind of mentioning how we haven't seen the final text of this bill draft, but it could be interpreted to fully eliminate an adult section or eliminate that kind of content from a library, and some legislators said that could be seen as eliminating adult sections from libraries. Is that more felt in the smaller rural libraries, or is that just an interpretation of the law or the bill draft?
Right, it's hard when we haven't.
It's hard.
It
That
is
one's
hard.
really
That is
hard.
Yeah.
that's a hard one to answer. I'll go back to the first iteration of this bill, just because we don't know where we're getting. So last spring when we started talking about restricting access, that would be really hard for a small library to restrict access, to say, okay, it's one thing to move things to adult section, which I don't love for a myriad of reasons. One being, if you have content in a YA book, it's developmentally appropriate for teens.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've moved that to the adult section. So now they're with content that is developmentally appropriate for adults. So we actually are asking for a whole nother set of problems. So then if we go to restricting access, like in my library, you walk in the front doors and here's like the children's section and here's the adult section. What am I going to do? Like put up an iron curtain? Like block it off? Am I going to be carding people at the door? Like, which is what has happened in Idaho.
Idaho.
So it is a reality that we understand that this could create one of two scenarios. The library becomes all children or becomes all adults and there's no in between. That would be a disservice to our communities, because as you know, when you go to a store, you're not either all children or all adults. We have this whole lifespan of development, and it is our job to provide materials for a newborn all the way up to 100.
My former manager used to say birth to death. We
Yeah.
serve birth to death, and we do. Yeah.
We do, and if we can't do that, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about resources, really, it's interesting because this topic, which perhaps reflects the needs or the concerns of a minority of our users, is taking up a disproportionate amount of our time. But what it does is it takes away our ability to provide services or focus to all of the rest of our users in a variety of ways. And the amazing thing about libraries today is that we are so much more than books, so much more than materials. We are community hubs. And when we talk about literacy, it's literacy of all kinds, right? It's financial literacy, it's health and wellness literacy, it's culinary literacy, it's about recreation, it's about fitness, it's about all the things that might enhance or improve the quality of your life. And that's what we bring to our communities these days. We are a community amenity. And when Wyoming's talking about things like attracting top talent and bringing in business and entrepreneurs and retaining the young people of our state, it's amenities and social institutions like libraries that do that. Mm-hmm. We attract young families. We bring startups. We make people want to be here because we're what makes a community a nice place to live in. And so let us focus on what we do best. And that's attracting people. That's making people want to stay here and live here. And I've looked at what the Chamber and Cheyenne leads and what people tout when they try to bring people here. And one of the things they tout is, look at our library. Mm-hmm. Look at what our library does. We bring thousands and thousands and thousands of people in our doors every single year, and we also reach out and build partnerships, and we make Cheyenne and Laramie County a great place to live. And that's where we should be putting our time and our resources and our energy. And yeah, like there may be a list of 30 or so titles that people might disagree on, but let's talk about those. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about those. Let's get together with our community members who have concerns about those. Let's go through our reconsideration process and talk about those. And I am willing to do that with any of our stakeholders that have concerns about those and have a community conversation about it. But attacking libraries by and large at the statewide level to talk about a very minuscule portion of our collection is is really having a disproportionately negative impact on the success of libraries, our ability to recruit and retain talented library staff members and talented library leaders, and it's making us, it's putting a black eye on libraries in Wyoming from a nationwide perspective too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, so I think the last thing I'll ask is, Antonio, we talked about this a while ago, I think after the last Judiciary Committee meeting maybe, or somewhere around then, and on the phone you had told me something along the lines of, you weren't necessarily supportive of the legislation, but you were confident in libraries in the state, saying that, we'll figure out a way to make things work. Is that still how you feel about this?
That's a good question. I think maybe ask me in a couple weeks.
Okay.
I think this week after Monday, I'm just a little deflated.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a little bit deflated. Mostly I feel deflated because it feels like after watching the session, we've lost some of the advocates that I thought that we had, particularly in Laramie County. Some of the legislators that I felt like spoke on behalf of libraries and represented library interests didn't do that this time, and that was disappointing. And also the language and the references towards libraries and library staff members that was used at this committee meeting was pretty negative and not very productive, and it just made me feel deflated as a community leader and as a resource to our county. So I'm in that place right now, but after I read the legislation and have an opportunity to circle back, I might feel differently. And I certainly am still incredibly optimistic about reaching out with some of our other community leaders. I feel very much we are the same stakeholders as some of these agencies and community groups that are leading this effort, and some of the legislators that have sponsored and authored this legislation. We have the same interests in mind. We have the same end goal, really, to protect the youth and the minors of our state. We want the same things in the end. So knowing that, I feel like, how can we not find common ground? So I do have faith in that. I just I wonder, and right now feel a little bit deflated by some of the methods and some of the language being used, and I think I just need some time to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think it's important to remember that library interests are community interests. Like, we are tasked with upholding First Amendment rights for everybody in the community. And I know that that's been bandied about, and this isn't about the First Amendment and things like that. But like, we are professionals who've been trained in this, and we have some real questions about, are we going to be breaking a bigger law if something like this gets put into place? It's really concerning. We'd like to have those conversations about what we know as professionals and how we've been trained as professionals. And how libraries, how we function and how we work, because some of what's being proposed is I think at the end of the day, I haven't seen, none of us has seen the engrossed legislation, but at the end of the day, should this pass, our libraries will not look the same as they do right now. I don't know what that means exactly. I don't know how exactly that plays out, but they won't look like they do right now. And so if you love your library, if you love how your library looks and functions and serves you as a member of the community, please recognize that our interests, our library interests, are in serving our community, and they are the same as the community interests. And I think that it's time to speak up and let legislatures know that you're happy with how things are, that things are working well. And we will continue to innovate. We will continue to see what we can do to meet these concerns. But to have something mandated as to how we do business, how we serve, it's going to change, fundamentally change some things about the library. I don't know what those will be, but they will definitely be felt by the community that we serve.
Well, I think also to the larger conversation around access to information is trying to legislate what you can, understanding that this is like the very top of a volcano, right? I mean, when you talk about access to sexually explicit material, the library is like a tiny star in a universe of content, and where minors are accessing content that is particularly troublesome or worrisome, it's not here.
No.
And at least our information is vetted, it's age appropriate in that it's geared towards the audience it's intended for, it's been published under reputable authors by reputable publishers, the kind of content that they can find online through peers, through unvetted resources. That's what's scary.
Right.
As a parent to 3 little kids, that's what's scary. And particularly with the content being generated through AI resources today.
So scary.
That's what's scary. And if kids are looking for this content anyway, I just wonder where we're going to push people. And not that it necessarily needs to be available anywhere, but it just begs the question of where are our efforts being placed, and is it the appropriate place?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure with a round table like this, you guys could talk about it all day.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming and chatting about this today. And thank you, Antonia, for organizing all these people here today. Librarians from across the state offered public comment when the Judiciary Committee met in August, where they asked the lawmakers to form a joint task force between librarians and lawmakers to workshop the bill draft. That request was denied because lawmakers said they had felt they fully understood the librarians' views after receiving ample public comment. Our arts and entertainment reporter Taylor Staples is out this week, so I don't have a roundup of upcoming events. But before we close out, here's a recap of some of our top stories and headlines from the past week. A local man was arrested Friday on 22 counts of felony aggravated cruelty to animals following an investigation that uncovered more than 100 injured, sick, and severely neglected animals at a residential property. Michael O'Hearn was arrested and booked into the Laramie County Detention Center. Detectives seized more than 100 animals during a warrant service. The Wyoming Legislature's Select Committee on Gaming advanced major reforms for parimutuel wagering Tuesday, moving forward a bill granting local approval for simulcasting facilities and passing a significantly amended bill establishing definitive caps on historic horse racing terminals. And finally, for local leaders and housing advocates, the newly opened Robbins Point Apartments represents more than just new affordable units. It stands as a symbol of hope, stability, and community for low-income families across Cheyenne. Robbins Point is a 48-unit affordable housing community with a mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments. That's it for this week's episode of Wyoming Watch. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to check back next Friday for more.